welcome to the Motivational Millennial Podcast. I'm Ivy LeClaire.
And I'm Blake Brandis.
Our conversation today is inspired by our interview with Chelann Gienger, and the theme is success as a journey, not a destination. Blake, would you like to get us going today?
Sure thing. Chelann's story is so fascinating because she started off in her entrepreneurial endeavors at the age of 15. And then by the time she was 18, she fired up this juice bar in Yakima, Washington. And now she's got a book and a podcast out. And it was such a great reminder of the power of starting where you are now. And what I mean by that is so often we look at something and say, one day I'll do that. One day I'll be that. And the irony is the best way to get there and to achieve those things is to start right now with what you have, where you are, as good or as bad or as mediocre as you think you are. Because one of the things that Chelann said in the interview is that she's grown so much and advanced so much just in the 6 years since she started. And I just think to myself, what an incredible advantage she has starting at 15 and all the experience she's going to get, all the mistakes she's going to make, but all the resources she's going to gain, the knowledge, the experience, the connections. So I think it's like anything. Ideally, the time to start was 10 years ago, but the next best time to start is now, whether it's investing, learning a skill or an instrument or a language. And so I think it's a good encouragement for me because I start to feel, oh man, I'm in my mid-30s. Oh gosh, I wish I had started some of this stuff 10 years ago. It's like, hey, that's cool. You are where you are now, so start from where you are now. And I'm wondering if there are some experiences you've had of starting where you are or wishing you'd started earlier, but just having to accept, hey, this is where I am now and this is where I'm going from here.
Yeah, do you know the first thing that comes to my mind, I think I've shared this story at some point when we were talking about growth mindset. But when I was 17 or something, I decided that I wanted to start playing softball. I'd never played softball really in my life. I never did any kind of organized sports or anything. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I go to one practice and I was just so awful that I didn't go back because I just was not in a place at the time. I didn't have a growth mindset at that moment. I was just like, F that, I'm going to go do something I'm good at.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely one of those moments where I let that perspective and that fear stop me because I had it in my head that all of these other girls were seasoned, that probably a lot of them had started playing when they were like 5 or something, I just thought there's no possible way I can ever catch up to that. There's no way that I'm going to be a good asset. And it was just, in part it was humiliating because like one coach had to take me inside. I couldn't hit the ball. Like he just was just so bad. And it was for like a summer recreational city thing. Like it was totally low pressure, but I just was not in the mental space to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to have this perspective that you're sharing about starting now, no matter what, no matter where you are, how old you are. I'm always really impressed by people who don't go to get their undergraduate degree until they're in their 40s or 50s or 60s, It's amazing to me because they're not buying into this story of, well, I should have done that a long time ago. I'm not going to do it then, And that was just one of those moments where when I was a teenager, when I definitely bought into that story. And so, I think when I try to think of other times in my life, I don't know. I think that I've grown enough to where a lot of the time I'm willing to try and just go with it and play now and not worry too much about it. But that for me is just one instance that stands out.
Yeah, because you can tell yourself a story at any age. I'm too old or I'm too young. It's fascinating when I'm doing coaching with different people and people who are 31 will tell me I'm too old to do something. And I'm just like, I hear that from people who are in their 50s, like, oh, I wish I done it in my 30s. I'm so old now. And I hear from people in their 70s, oh, I'm too old now. And then I meet someone in their 80s who's, going out and figure out how to use Spotify and, and taking art lessons. And it's just like, it can be easy to buy into some preconceived cultural narrative about how old you should be when you do something, when you start something. And this is where the growth mindset research from Carol Dweck coming out of Stanford is so amazing, because
Mm-hmm.
what it says is how good you are when you start at something is a floor, not a ceiling. It's the baseline. It doesn't have any determination on how good you can eventually get at it with persistence, hard work, and asking for support. And those three things are important: persistence, hard work, and asking for support, because without all three of those, it's easy to get discouraged, to give up, or to not allow yourself to be fully resourced and set yourself up for success. And so I think it's always a good reminder that we need to check the stories that we have. And a lot of those are subconscious. We might not actively be thinking that, but just in the back of our head, the reason we don't start something now is because we're not ready for whatever reason. It's like, you're never ready. You just got to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that no matter where you are in your life, the only thing that you can experience is the present moment. So it doesn't matter what the past was or what the future may be, because you only literally have this present moment. So if you want to learn a musical instrument or learn a foreign language or start a business or whatever, no matter where you are or what your education level or experience or etc. is, the point is that you can still have that in your life in the present moment, no matter what age you are, no matter where you are compared to other people or peers or whatever. Like, none of that is relevant. Not your past isn't relevant, your future isn't relevant. It's like, are you picking up a clarinet, because that's my instrument right there? Are you picking up a clarinet and playing it right now and experiencing it in the present moment, which is ultimately what you're wanting to do and what life is about?
Yeah, and Seth Godin says something that I think is helpful here, because we often have this fear. Okay, so if I try it and I fail at it, what's that going to mean? Are people going to make fun of me? Am I going to be disappointed in myself? And Seth Godin has a helpful framing. He just says the only type of failure you need to avoid is failure that's so extreme that it takes you out from trying again or from playing the game. So, like, you don't want to borrow a bunch of money from a mob boss and then have them come and shatter your kneecaps
Oh
or throw you off
gosh.
a bridge. Like, that's a situation where the stakes of failure are too high.
Sure.
You may not want your kid to be living out on the street if you fail. Like, so don't put your house in jeopardy or something. But it's like anything that's not kind of life threatening is a level of threshold of failure worth risking. And I love that perspective, because it's like, okay, so the worst that happens is the worst that happens up to whatever that threshold is. So go for it.
And I think everybody's threshold is different.
Sure.
Some people are going to be totally cool living with van life.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like, because they're knowing that it's temporary van life, not permanent van life, or maybe they love permanent van life anyway. So I think that threshold is going to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
So it's just knowing what that is for you, but also knowing that, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I fully agree with the sentiment, because I feel like our worst case scenario brain or our inner critic or saboteur voice can always come up with a scenario that makes it not worth it.
Oh, that's a good point.
So it's like, how do you distinguish between what is some total bullcrap that your brain is just throwing? I mean, yes, there is reality to some of these fears. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so convincing. But if we truly let them convince us, then, we may not do. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, I think that if we're only making steps or taking leaps that are going to feel really safe ultimately, what does that mean for our life? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I keep saying, does that make sense? I said it on one that we recorded recently, and I didn't even catch myself until later. But I'm keeping this in. I'm asking you, Blake, in the future, as my podcast co host, to help me, and also friend in life, to not say, does that make sense? Because I'm talking as if, I mean, I know that I tend to present many ideas at once, but I feel like when I say, does that make sense? It's like I'm saying I am unable to articulate myself, which is not accurate.
Sure.
And it's bugging the crap out of me right now because I feel like it's a representation of some way that I'm viewing myself or some cultural thing or whatever, but I want to purge it from life. And so I'm just stating this in front of you, God, and our audience that I'm trying to not say that anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's a good reminder that if we hold other people as empowered, that they have the ability to ask follow-up questions if it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And you can
Yes.
just hold people as strong and resourceful, and that if they need to ask a question, they'll ask a question.
Yes. And that I am, I don't need to say, does that make sense? That's crazy. Anyway.
That's a good point, because you could frame it. So I'm just imagining like a situation with a power imbalance, like a boss asking, does that make sense to the staff? But another way to frame it might be, what questions do you have about what I just said? Right? That's sort of getting at a similar idea, but
It's
from a more
very
empowered.
different. This feels much more like I'm coming at this in part because I'm a woman and women tend to qualify everything that they say.
Sure.
It's more like a filler that's also a qualifier than an actual question.
That's a good point.
So that's why I'm calling it out, because I don't need to be doing that. Everybody notice those things, purge them from your vocabulary. Anyway, thank you.
It totally makes sense.
That made sense.
Oh, bazoom.
That's
All
so
right.
funny. But to go back to what I was saying, I think a better thing to say is, did you have any thoughts on that?
I do have some thoughts on that. You're right. If you're establishing a personal boundary that is an intentioned, rational, thought out, and measurable boundary, then I think that can be useful. But if there's some abstract, like I don't want to end up on the street or my friends to abandon me or people I love to hate me kind of thing,
Hmm.
then those are not useful boundaries to put in place to support you. So
Yeah.
Seth was saying, how much is he willing to invest of his own money in a business endeavor? Up to what threshold is he willing to put money in? So for him, he just needed to have a cutoff. And that was really the point of his initial advice. And I was extrapolating it to this other situation. So I think returning to the spirit of what he was initially saying and reflecting on what you just said is hold a measurable boundary for things that have the potential to spiral out of control if you need a measurable boundary, but also have the self-awareness to recognize when that's just a story that's fear-based. I think that's where I was going with that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that perspective. And the thing that really stood out for me was this whole concept of enjoying the journey because success isn't a destination. That's something that Chelann specifically said. And, I think it goes to this point of your life is a journey and it's made up of moments. And so when you look at it from that perspective, if learning something new at the age of 80 is going to make your current journey more enjoyable, then do it rather than thinking, okay, am I going to be able to be a successful piano player after? Like, that shouldn't be why you're doing it. It's more about,
Sure.
I want to consciously make my journey of life more enjoyable. And I think it can be really hard to do this. I think for myself, I tend to, have the expectation. I mean, and we talk about this a lot actually with the podcast and with millennials and, in general, how we see immediate successes on YouTube and, this sort of thing. And it feels like it's the norm rather than the
Exception.
exception. Yes, thank you. Whew.
The succession. Ooh.
The
Ooh.
inception.
You had success inception.
I
The
think
success
I
exception.
think we've been talking about so many abstract ideas that my brain is starting to forget the very concrete need for words. But I think, for myself, I tend to expect when I have a goal in mind that just having the idea for the goal and the desire for the goal is going to make me have instant success. Like that I'm going to just like tomorrow, I'm going to lose, 20 pounds or whatever it is. And I think that's because in so many ways, I am focused on success as a destination rather than as a journey. And so the way that I've been really reorienting and trying to focus on the journey rather than the destination is I'm thinking about, so I'm 31 years old. I'm thinking to myself, at 40, what kind of life and lifestyle would I like to be leading at that time? And knowing if I put 9 years of work, small, consistent steps of work into whatever it is that I'm wanting to create, I mean, what do I want to gift my 40-year-old self through that consistent journey?
Mm.
So instead of thinking, okay, I want to lose X amount of weight and it needs to be done in 3 months, it's just like, you know what? When I'm 40, I want to be fit and active and traveling lots of places and having, X many clients and, whatever I'm wanting my life to look like. And more than anything, visioning is about getting the frequency and a resonance of what you're wanting to create in your life. So when I vision myself at 40, I get excited, I feel empowered, I feel passionate. And so it gives me fuel and patience to know that right now, my life isn't going to look like that on the external. Right now, my life looks like moving toward that. It's like when you go to college or you go to high school or whatever, you go to college and you know that it's going to take 4 to 5 years to get your degree. You don't expect to get the degree in one semester because that's just not reality. And so you're not putting that pressure on yourself. All you have to do is freaking focus on this one semester at a time, one
Mm-hmm.
class at a time, one day at a time, and know that the goal will be achieved as long as you keep showing up. And that's what I'm trying to orient to now is as long as I keep showing up, what could be possible for me in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? And how can I enjoy that journey?
And that's a great framing when you think about it as what gift do I want to give myself in 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's not this disciplinarian, oh, you need to get fit and be healthy and da da da. It's not the parental voice. Instead, it's an act of kindness and excitement. Yeah, if I could give myself a gift of having learned something or having a skill or having a bunch of money because I'd invested and it was making interest for 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of gift would I want to give myself? I think that's a really nice way to look at it. And the college example you gave is really great too, because expectations determine reality. And so if we're expecting massive success instantly, of course we're going to be disappointed. But if you go into college expecting the gradual progression of milestones towards a goal, then it's a lot easier to be happy on the journey, which was the point of your
Yes.
topic today. Because it's about creating little wins and little experiences in the present moment that might add up to something bigger down the road. But yeah, you don't have to be having massive victories the whole time. You don't have to necessarily have a string of Instagram worthy moments every single day along your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such a gift, even in this present moment, to allow. That's the whole point, right? All you have is this present moment. So at 40, if my actual reality doesn't fit this vision I have for myself right now, that's fine. That's life. That's probably going to happen because you just can't know. But what it does do when I'm oriented that way is make this present moment more enjoyable. It makes this experience of life more enjoyable. I mean, that's in reality all that we have. So if we can make every present moment of life more enjoyable, then it accumulates to a more enjoyable life.
Yeah, and you can do things that are difficult and they can still be enjoyable. I think that is the misconception too, that we're not
Yeah.
saying hedonism is the answer. We're
Let's
saying
just hang out
that
and have
you
pleasure all day.
exactly, that's not
I
what we're
mean,
saying. We're
I'm
saying
a
it's
fan of that.
possible.
No. I mean, yeah.
it's about finding alignment with what you want. But you can have these goals that are challenging and that require a lot of work and a lot of discipline and still make the process fun. I think one of the most powerful transformations that I've consistently seen with my coaching clients is when they go from just thinking about how they can survive to how they can thrive in their lives. And I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it did. And they define thriving in different ways, but one consistent pattern is doing things that they used to think that they had to do or that they were supposed to do and reframing them as things that they want to do because they added something to it that was fun, or they changed some aspect about it, or they shortened the time frame, or they limited it. Whatever individual step they took to take ownership, which is one of Chelann's other points, they took full ownership over their own experience of their life. And it was so powerful because they started adding things they actually wanted to do. And I'd say that is part of making the journey an exciting and fun and enjoyable process.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you brought this up because I think that when we often talk about fulfillment, on the show, and I mean, when I say enjoyable, I'm talking about in large part fulfillment, something that's fulfilling to you. And the way that we're defining fulfillment is living in alignment with your personal values. And sometimes your life is going to be fulfilling without being happy in that particular instance. Because a good example of this is, if you have a very high value of family is like your, number 1, 2, 3 value, then it's going to be very in alignment and very fulfilling to be at the bedside of a dying family member, supporting them, even though that experience is heartbreaking and sad. Your experience of life in that moment will be more fulfilling than if you were not in that situation and living that particular moment in a different way. That is going to be more fulfilling, even though it may not be happy.
Yeah, that's a great distinction.
I think about that too with like strength training or running or something, like there are people who run who love running in the moment. And there are lots of people who run who freaking hate running in the moment. But it's more fulfilling for them to make sure that they, like, it's if it's in alignment with their value of, I don't know, health or being in shape or being active or, starting their day out a certain way. Like if that is in alignment with that value, it makes it worth it. If you're running, however, because you want people to like you, it's not going to be sustainable and it's not going to be very fulfilling. It's going to be a crappy experience versus if it's something that's really honoring your values.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something more I could say to clarify that? No.
No, I think that brings it to where we finished our conversation with Chelann, which was about the importance of values and knowing your own values and being true to them, whatever way that looks for you. And that is the key to fulfillment. So I think you brought us full circle, Ivy.
You did. Wow. Look at that. Nice little bow on the top there.
That's right. Awesome.
Well, thank you for a great conversation.
Thank you for a great conversation. And we appreciate our wonderful listeners for checking out this episode. We look forward to connecting with you again next week on the Motivational Millennial Podcast.
Bye. For show notes and previous episodes, or to learn more about our coaching and event offerings, visit motivationalmillennial.com. That's millennial, MILLENNIAL. Keep in touch with us at facebook.com/motivationalmillennial.
We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email with your thoughts, comments, and suggestions at podcast@motivationalmillennial.com. And tell us who you might like to hear from, or if you think you or anyone you know would be good for the show.
Our theme music was composed and performed by our very own Blake Brandis.
The Motivational Millennial Podcast is edited by Brittany Felix. Have a great week, Motivational Millennials!